Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide.
Good Monday, preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
I'm excited about today's episode because, I love to talk about children and play so that we can help facilitate it more deeply and in ways that really help them to build skills.
Yeah.
Very often during this podcast, and I think rightfully so, we've talked about free play time and the value of free play during which children need the opportunity to make decisions and should get the opportunity to make decisions. They're totally deciding what they're going to do. And teachers go out there and build on teachable moments. And we've talked about that, like I said, a lot on this podcast, because it's one of the things that I think, let's say 5-something years ago, when we first started this podcast, I don't think it was as widely implemented as it is today, which is
I think that's true.
And it's or at least not for as long a period of time, but it's thanks to systems like the quality rating and improvement systems in every state, or practically every state, that have inspired much more free play time because it's part of the requirements to get a good rating in those systems. So it's become much more prevalent. It's also become, over the years, not only the past 5 years, but over the years, it's become just a drumbeat by the National Association for the Education of Young Children, the American Academy of Pediatrics. Like, everybody's talking about free play time. But there are other types of play that we need to make sure happen in our week. We need all of these types of play to be happening pretty consistently because they do different things for the children's development. That free play time, when children are wholly deciding what they're going to do, is called spontaneous play. Spontaneous play, again, very important to build thinking skills along with all of the other skills, but a lot of thinking skills because children are making decisions, which when you think about what it's like to make a decision, even as an adult, a lot of thinking and hard work goes into that, a lot of brain work. So I don't want to take away from spontaneous play when we talk about the other two types of play. I just want to make sure everybody knows that that's still needed, still required, still should be at least 60 minutes of the day. But then we have these other times of day, which should all be playful from the viewpoint of the children. And you're probably, perhaps, including these other types of play and don't even realize it. So let's talk about the other two types of play that we should be seeing in early childhood classrooms. One is guided play. And that doesn't mean that the teacher is making every decision. What it means is that the teacher is setting up the playtime with particular goals in mind. For example, if the teacher wants to support fine motor skills during small group time, there might be a table where there's all sorts of fine motor items available. Children can still make some decisions, some limited decisions, but they're not fully deciding everything because the teacher has a goal in mind. Another example of guided play might be, we want to support gross motor skills. So we're going to offer you some balls, some hula hoops, the parachute we're going to offer you the ability to go outside and use the playground equipment. And some children might want to use balls. But we're going to really encourage this gross motor movement during this period of time so that it's sort of been guided. Here's another example that I often see in classrooms. We want children to be patterning. So what we're going to do is we're going to offer several different ways to pattern, including taking our beads and creating necklaces and bracelets and that sort of thing, and see if we can encourage the children to make a pattern. But ultimately, they're deciding what that pattern is going to be. They're deciding even if they're going to do that, because all I can do is suggest it and then see what the children do with it. But that would tell me how much they understand patterning, perhaps. So there is some guidance in the way the teacher sets it up.
yeah, I find the guided play is more like the power of suggestion kind of thing, where like, hey, I just happen to have all these sorting bears here. If you would like to join it's like a very much a power of it's there. I provided it, but it's up to them if they choose to do it, right? And how they choose to do it is up to them. I've suggested it, I've created this opportunity for them, but it's not fully free play or spontaneous play, because if that was the case, then they would just be choosing that out of the centers and that would be it, right? They would choose that out of the box and they would do that. This is me like saying, you know what, we need some working on scissor work or something. I'm going to place a whole bunch of things out here to build fine motor skills and their scissor development and whatever. It's more like a guided suggestion, like the power of suggestion, and you just hope that they choose it.
Which it can also take place during small group time. You can give the children some options for building the same skill. I think the focus being on, we are as teachers intending to support a certain sort of learning by what we offer, but like you say, then the children can decide if they're going to do it or not.
Right.
We don't force children to stay at our tables, and we don't
correct
children to sit during large group time. We don't force that, but it isn't guided play is not teacher directed. That's a third type of play. So you have to I think of these on a continuum from the most student decision-making to the least student decision-making. The most decision-making by the children is spontaneous play. And then if we were to move along that line, the next level of children being able to make decisions would be guided play, because now the teacher is inserting, right? We're starting to insert our ideas because we want to support particular types of development and we want to make sure that that gets done. Even something like for social emotional, I've used a lot of physical examples, but social emotional can also be guided play. We might give the children a dilemma that's happened in the classroom. Children were fighting over a toy. Here, would you like to take the puppets or the dolls or or the finger puppets and act that out and see what they should do when this happens? Here, you take the materials and you play with them. You decide what should happen when this situation happens. That's helping children to build social skills and emotional skills.
Right.
And then if we're going to move along that continuum to the least amount of decision-making power by the children, that would be teacher-directed play. That I often think of as games with rules, just as a general. I'm not only talking board games, though board games would qualify, but just as a general statement, games with rules. So if I have a bunch of children in the gym on a rainy day and I say to them, let's see if we can play something like, it depends on their age, of course, if they can do this, but let's see if they can play red light, green light. That is teacher directed, right? I'm telling them to line up. I'm telling them I'm going to say this thing, then you run. Another really difficult game with rules for this age group is Simon Says. That usually doesn't go very well. It's like every adult's go-to, but it doesn't go well.
That cannot be my go-to anymore, because I feel like there's too many rules, I feel, and there's too much stuff to remember for their age group, at least for the little guys that I teach. Maybe for an older group, yes, but I feel like that's a hard one. Go-to. I think red light, green light is one, or I've seen it where people have set up like kind of like races and relay races outside.
Obstacle course. When the teacher sets up an obstacle course and says to the children, come on, we're all going to line up and we're going to all go through this obstacle course. It's another one I just thought of. Duck, duck, goose. Duck, duck, goose. Duck, duck, goose.
Yeah.
Widely done, teacher directed. There are rules. We're going to tell the children when to sit, when to run, what to do, how is this played. There are many opportunities for all of these three types of play, and each of them has their benefits. We said earlier, spontaneous play builds a lot of cognitive skills, a lot of thinking skills, decision making, right? Is totally the children's. Guided play supports particular standards, goals, milestones, whatever you want to call them.
Skills. Yeah.
The teacher has predetermined and puts out things maybe for the children to choose from, but it's a limited choice because we're trying to intentionally build skills. So that's different. That doesn't take place during free play time usually. You can have, though, you can have a guided play within it. Like if we say to the children, during free play time, we're going to be over here with blocks and I'm going to be helping people build ramps. So you can choose whether to come over here or not because it's free play time. But then the children who do come over are going to experience guided play because I'm going to be assisting them in setting up these ramps and helping them to understand how they need to be set up and then letting them take that information and run with it.
Then, let them go with it. Yeah.
Right. So that's like guided play within the free play, which can happen.
Within the free play. Yeah. That happens. I think that happens a lot, at least in my classroom, because I usually am hanging out in one of these areas. And usually I will hang out in that area because I have some sort of skill or goal in mind, and that's why I'm hanging out over there, so and then in hopes that either later that day within free choice that they've run with it, or the next day that I don't have to be over there anymore, they've gained the skill and they can do it on their own during free choice. And if I still see that they need a little guidance, maybe I'll hang out over there again, just to see. Or if it's a different group of children, maybe I would too.
The key being guidance, the word you used, guidance, rather than they must follow these rules.
Right.
The beginning of a school year is a time when we do a lot of guided play, or we should, because in the first few weeks of any school year, we want to take the children around the room in small groups and model for them how every area's play takes place. If I'm modeling, but not forcing them to do exactly what I've done, then that's guided play. So if we go over to the manipulatives area and I take out the Legos and I start to explain that the Legos go in this box, and then when we take them out, we build and I just demonstrate building, but I don't make them build what I'm building, then it's guided play. Right. However, if I sit the children down and I say, we are all going to build a bridge. Now this is teacher directed play because I've told them what to do.
Directed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which also has its place. It also has its place.
Yes, because I think this is the beginning of children learning how to follow directions.
Yes.
And as they get older into the older grades, that's a lot of it. A lot of it is following directions, and following rules and how do I follow the rules and yet not lose my identity in this group kind of thing. And that's a lot of it. And that's where I feel like I think sometimes teacher directed gets a bad rap a little bit, but there's value to it too, because they need to learn how to function in that too, because as they get into the second, third, fourth grade, it's a lot of, here's the directions on how to do this particular thing at school. And if you don't know how to follow directions, if you haven't been taught that at a young age in a very developmentally appropriate way, you're not going to know what to do. I agree that value in it.
I agree that it has value, but it shouldn't be as dominant as it was in years past.
Right. But I think what's happened is I think people have abandoned it a lot.
Entirely.
Totally,
you can't abandon it entirely. Yeah. You can't. As Alison said, they still need to know sometimes you follow directions, right? There are times of day when you make a choice and there are times of day when you follow directions. And they need to know things like, in a game, let's say we are playing some sort of board game. In a game with rules, sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. And so we just congratulate the winners when they win. And but regardless of how you're feeling about that, we sometimes have to just follow the rules. So they learn some life lessons that are going to serve them well over the years through teacher directed play. The only time frame that I think, and if I'm wrong here and differently from me, folks, please write to us and correct me. But I think the only time frame that has been dictated to the early childhood world, and it should be, is that for free play, that it needs to be at least 60 uninterrupted minutes. I don't think that we have guidance. Do you, Allison, for how long should they
I
get
don't,
guided play and teacher
I
directed
don't,
play?
I don't think it's there at all. And I think this because I've learned through those rating systems is that they want to see that 60 minutes of free play, even if it means you aren't doing your guided play that day. Like say your
Right.
small groups is your guided play, which oftentimes it is, right? They would rather you skip the small groups in favor for that hour long 60 minutes of free play, which I don't think is necessarily the right thing either.
I'll tell you what I tell people. I'll tell you what I tell
know?
people. I tell people there are two sacred times of day that you never skip: free play and
Right.
small groups. Both free
Right. I
play and
agree
small
with
group has
that.
to take place.
But the rating systems does not say that. The rating systems, they would rather you skip small groups so that you can fit in 60 or more minutes of free play. And I don't think that's the right thing to do either, you know, like, but
I believe in balance.
because I know that because to me, there's no balance then, right? You need a balance. And I know that because that happened to me last year. Like the 60 minutes went over and they were like, nope, you got a perfect score in that area, because I'm like, but I didn't get to my small groups. They're like, yeah, no, it doesn't matter. I'm like, huh. Like,
Yeah,
okay.
no, they want to see free.
But yeah.
But again, I think that there's
Yeah.
so much talk about this free playtime and such an emphasis on it, because in the past and for many years, and maybe still in some early childhood programs, the dominant type of play was teacher directed. And we do need to have balance, right? So we need to step away from that some. I remember in the beginning of my career, we had, even all those years ago, which now we're talking about more than 20 years ago, we had free playtime, but it wasn't 60 minutes. It was more like 30 minutes way back in the day.
30 minutes.
And then, so what happened to that other 30 minutes? It was spent with teacher direction, probably. So I understand why the emphasis, as we've learned more about the value of that spontaneous play. I totally get why the emphasis. I'm a big believer in balance. There needs to be balance. There needs to be times of day when children get to decide. There are times of day that are teacher directed. And then there's sort of that in between of guided play. And I think that ideally they all take place. If I had to say to a program, and I have, if something happened, what part of my day should I throw out and give away? For me, my advice is always throw away large group time. That's not when the most significant learning takes place.
I agree. I typically throw away that time because I don't find significant learning going on. It's just me talking at them rather than with them. And so my large group time is me. I sit down, we gather, we sing a song. Maybe I talk about what we're going to do that day and off you go. Like, it's really not that long of a time, but I do know there's like even some of the curriculums that have like this entire long script that goes on, and you're like, yeah, we'd be here for a half hour if I have to read this whole script. So I typically cut that part out, or at least not, I don't want to say I cut it out, because I think it's important that they gather as a group, but like, it's very short. It's like a song, some talk about what we did over the weekend, maybe. Hey, here's what we're going to do. Or if I have some guided play out, like, hey, in the art center, we're going to be working on this today, and then off you go, and that's it. But I also think there's other teachers who are doing this large group as a very, very long thing.
They're not really scripted. That's a myth. They're giving you enough information to fill your large group time. But as a teacher, you should have the flexibility to decide, I'm going to do this piece of it and this piece of it, but not this piece of it. And
not that piece of it.
Right. And they're really, most curriculums that I've seen are not scripted in a mandated way. They're scripted in a way that would help you, support you to decide, what am I going to do during this large group time with the attention span of the children I have?
Who's running that curriculum? But
well, I'm just saying the intent of the curriculum.
That's what it's supposed to. Yes, I think that is the intent. And I think as teachers, we know that, but I think sometimes administrators do not. So then when they come in to observe, they're like, well, you didn't hit all the spots or whatever. And you're like, but I don't have to. And I think that's where large group gets a little too long, and out of hand sometimes, and is not as effective as it should be.
Large groups should still be playful. It's still a playtime. It should still be playful from the viewpoint of the children.
Yeah.
It should still be fun. Is a teacher directed playtime of day and needs to be brief, right? And then at other times of day, we will do guided play, and we will have that 60 minutes of spontaneous play, so that when there's balance, right? If there's balance, then the children get to experience all those different skill building and thinking building activities. Because even teacher directed, if they're following directions and you're playing a game with rules, there's thinking that has to go into being able to follow those rules that we want them to develop.
Right.
So, if the preschool peeps were to walk away from this episode with anything, it's think about the sort of play you're implementing. Absolutely the hour of spontaneous play. Also, how much of your day is guided play, and then how much is teacher directed? Because ideally, I think teacher directed is the least amount of time in your day. Guided play is better because at least they're making some decisions within what you've decided they need to work on, right? Within what you've decided we're going to focus on, they are making some decisions. Like, we're going to focus on fine motor and we're going to string beads, but you get to decide which beads you're going to use, and you get to decide what you're going to make, and that sort of thing. So think about how many decisions the children are actually making, and that might help you understand which type of play you're doing even.
Right.
All right, now everybody go back to working with the children and start to pay attention to, is this what we're doing right now at this time of day? Would I classify this as spontaneous play, guided play, or teacher directed play? And if one of those three is missing, you need to make sure that it starts to happen.
Or if one of those three is too much, like, you need to make sure you have a balance here. Like, if you're doing an hour of teacher directed stuff when you should have an hour of spontaneous, maybe start to do a little shifting around.
You need to reduce your teacher directed, because an hour of teacher directed is like way too much for these kids. Okay.
But you never know.
We're going to talk about play in a different way, I think, in the next episode. So please come back to listen to what we're going to say about children and playing on our next episode, and we will see you next Monday. Or you'll hear us next Monday, one or the other.
Next Monday, one or the other. Bye, peeps.